Edward. So let's go for game number 1. Good luck, players, in 3, 2, 1, Tetris. And Rick starting with no delay. Edward starting just now, and both players start with a long bar. So there's that. Edward is building, and Rick is getting ready, getting the first Tetris. Edward is setting up still. Tetris ready. Edward at 22. Rick is waiting for the long bar. He's gonna go for a couple burns, maintain some balance, and he is ready. 23 for Rick, 22 for Edward. To Rick at 46, getting another Tetris to 69. Tetris for Edward, 47. Edward is building. Rick is building. Rick is ready. Edward is building. Edward is ready. Tetris for Rick. Rick at 91. Edward at 49. Tetris for Edward. Edward at 72. And Rick at 91. Rick is building. Tetris for Rick. Rick now at 114. Very clean game. Tetris for Edward. 1 at 95. Rick will have to make some decisions. He decides to burn and get the J tuck down. And there's a Tetris to 138. Edward at 95. So Edward trying to wait for Lombard, goes for a single. Tetris ready. Tetris for Edward. Edward at 140. Rick at Edward at 142 and taking the lead. Rick at 140. Tetris for Rick taking the lead back. 163. Somebody pinged me. Oh, it's India. Edward right now at 145. These players are getting ready. There's a Tetris from Edward. Edward at 168. Rick is ready, getting Tetris to 211. Edward getting his well open. Tetris ready. Rick is setting up. Tetris for Edward. Edward at 193, catching up. Rick is ready. Not quite. Still trying to set up. Edward is ready, however, and he's gonna take the lead again. 215 for Edward. Rick is gonna catch up and gets a Tetris to 239, taking the lead back. So pretty well played game from both players. We have a Tetris ready board from Edward. He takes the lead, but Rick is gonna take it back. Edward at 238, Rick at 262. So very close game, pretty neck and neck. And there is a Tetris ready board from Edward. Tetris for Edward. Edward at 262. Rick at 264. Tetris for Rick. Rick at 287. Edward is setting up. Edward is ready. Edward waiting for the Lombard. Tetris for Rick. Tetris for Edward. Edward at 285. Rick at 310. So we are looking forward to a pretty efficient game from both players. Tetris for Edward. Edward reaching the midpoint at 307. So very similar paces. Edward going for a Tetris ready board, gets ready. There's the Tetris for Edward. 330 takes the lead. Rick still waiting for the Lombard, gets the Lombard, takes the lead back. 334. Edward is ready again. So both players waiting for the Lombard. 334. Edward getting the Tetris to 353. Rick is ready at 335. So Edward is now in the lead. Edward is gonna go for some delayed burns as the Lombard is taking a bit to come. He's not getting the burns he needed, but his Tetris ready still. 354 for Edward, 343 for Rick. Tetris for... Oh, Edward didn't go for the Tetris. And there he goes. There's the Tetris for Edward. Edward at 383. He's gonna burn and try to get the hole in column 1 open. 386 for Edward. 369 for Rick. Gets a Tetris. Takes the lead. 392. Very, very efficient game from both players. Edward is ready, going for a column left well Tetris. He's gonna get it. He needs a J to get back to the right. Well, Tetris for Rick. Rick at 415. Edward 410. Edward's Tetris ready. Rick is ready. Both players waiting for the Lombard. Tetris for Rick at 438. Sorry. And Edward playing a bit aggressively. He's gonna go for the double. There's the Tetris. Tetris for Edward. Edward at 438. Rick at 438. So these players are pretty much tied. There's a Tetris for both again. 461 for Edward. 460 for Rick. Edward is getting ready, and Rick is gonna go for a delayed burn after that square is blocking the well. Rick is in the dig while Edward is clean. Tetris for Edward. Edward taking the lead, 484. Rick at 463, trying to get his well open. Tetris ready. Tetris for Edward, 507. Rick at 464. Rick with some dangerous maneuvers, but he manages to keep the board clean. Edward right now at 508. Rick at 491. We are approaching transition. Rick has 12 lines left. Edward has 16. Tetris for Rick. Rick at 514. Edward at 508. Edward is ready, but he's having a pretty unbalanced board into transition. This is not good. Rick, oh, an overshift from Edward, and Rick takes the lead at 514, Rick takes the lead at 514, taking the Tetris to 538, taking game number 1 as Edward topped out at 511. GG, very efficient games here, and Rick takes game number 1. Yeah, that's a very unfortunate one. Transition pressure, I call it. Game number 2 coming up. And we're waiting for players to get ready. Genesis is this weekend. I never knew where Rick lives in the US. I know that he's like on the southern side, but not quite where. We got a ready on screen from Rick, waiting for Edward to get ready. Yeah, so Genesis is happening. So for everybody who wants to have a taste of California, that's North California though. Let's go for game number 2. Starting in 3, 2, 1, Tetris. Rick and Edward are off. Sorry about that. Rick is setting up. Edward trying to get his board rebalanced. Tetris ready, but the board's looking pretty unbalanced right now. Looking pretty dangerous for Edward. Edward misdrops that L, and things are looking dire all of a sudden. Edward trying to survive this. He needs the right pieces. That J helps right now. Rick already with 2 Tetrises in. At 45, gets another to 68. Edward still in high dig. Oh, the left side requires a Lombard soon, and it looks like he can reach it, topping out at 4,000. Edward taking topping out already, and Rick taking game number 2. GG. I gave the point to the wrong person, my bad. There we go. Game number 2. So it's Rick's again. Let's go for game number 3. Got a ready on screen from Rick, waiting for Edward. We are only 12 minutes in, so unless Edward brings an upset, it seems that Rick is very close to a sweep here. Rick faces another day in the office. Yeah, Rick is pretty stoic. That's something I came to realize. We got it ready for Edward. Let's go for game number 3. In 3, 2, 1, Tetris. And we got game number 3 on the underway. We got Rick building a pretty strong left from the get-go, going for a 4 wide. Well, this is not Puyo Puyo Tetris, so it's not going to have any competitive advantage, but nonetheless, he's gonna have the first Tetris. 22,000 for Rick. Edward doing some cleanup to get his current position, getting 3 numbers in a row. There's the Tetris ready board. Tetris for Rick at 45, Edward at 7,200, getting his first Tetris to 30,000. Rick with a double well, he might start burning with it. Nope, he's gonna get Tetris ready immediately. Rick at 46 gets in a Tetris to 69, hey now. Rick is ready, Tetris for Edward at 55, Rick at 69, hey now. Tetris for Rick. Rick at 92. Edward 55, sorry. Ooh, Edward with some messy board situation happening here. This is looking pretty dangerous for Edward. Edward right now at 58, Rick at 138. Edward is going to get some burns. Edward right now at 62, Rick at 161. Edward is ready, Rick is ready, both players going for the Lombard, triple for Edward, 69, Rick getting a Tetris to 183, so Rick already over 100,000 points in the lead. His Tetris is ready again, Tetris for Edward and Rick, 207 for Edward, 207 for Rick, and Tetris for Edward to 115, and Rick is ready again, Edward is ready as well, both players waiting for the Lombard. Rick is gonna get a Tetris, same for Edward, 138 for Edward, Tetris for Rick, 253. Edward is building, going pretty aggressive with that Lombard placement, left side needs to be taken care of still. He's gonna get the J over, he's gonna go for a triple and then the Tetris to 167. Rick is still in the lead at 253, trying to get Tetris ready, he's ready now, and there's the Tetris. 276 for Rick and 267 for Edward. Edward is gonna, oh, okay, and Edward is currently at 173 and Rick at 280. Edward is setting up, Rick with some complications, 281 the score for Rick, Edward at 202, so Edward trying to reduce the gap as Rick is having a bit of a day happening right now. He is playing from row 4. He might clean that up and get back to the bottom. This is going to give the opportunity for Edward to catch up in the meantime. Ooh, he tried to go for a flat burn and he missed that flat burn, and yeah, he had a ghost burn there and topped out at 204. So Rick here, good for game number 3 in the match, advancing into the second round. GG. Alright. I think that's all from me. If anybody else has any suggestions, I'm gonna just go over the Tetris category and rate someone. Who to rate though? We get Aki. I rated Aki already yesterday, so could look into rating someone else. There is CT, I guess. Yeah. Who else to go for? Contato Subaru. Guido Lizard has Ian versus Top, so I'm gonna rate that. Guido Lizard. Let's rate them. Thank you very much for watching. Have a good one. Take care. Thank you very much for watching, and have a good night.
My first retrieves. Yeah, well,